Croom. I'm at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and as you heard the title, we'll be thinking about racing on Facebook, racial literacies, genres of race, and Black students. So I wanted to begin by thinking about how this connects to this year's theme for the International Conference on Urban Education. So just two questions to just have in mind as we think through this study. Where education is concerned, is learning and development improved by understanding the processes of race? Also, how valuable is a better understanding of race to global education partnerships and American schooling? And so this is just a quick look at a piece of the actual data set. This is actually part of the Facebook post. And then this is the actual article that was referenced by the post. Both of these were publicly posted. I was also a participant in this online platform experience. And so, beginning with the problems, and some of them have already been mentioned in the last presentation. So, obviously, white superordinate racialization, anti-Black racism, deficiency philosophy of Black students in American society, schools, and classrooms, continued failure of the field of literacy and school educators to adequately serve Black children in American schools and classrooms, and academic score, grade, course ranking, and we could go on as corroboration of Black subordinate racial hierarchy. So these are just the kind of problems that this study is intended to respond to. And so the purpose of this study was to develop empirical knowledge from my experiential knowledge of this rich telling case. And I went into this study with three questions. What are the genres of race in these texts? These are technically post-typographic texts to talk about it, how in terms of new literacies. What kinds of students are written as social fact? And also, how might problematic genres and the students written through them be rewritten? And so because of the time constraint, I'm fully capable of talking through questions as it relates to the philosophy, theory, and methodology that brought me to this. You're going to see some details, but to kind of keep it short, I approach this research, and frankly all research, with the vindications philosophy of people of color, particularly African American people. I'm doing this with a post-white orientation. Also, I synthesize a speech act theory of race and critical race theory in education, and that also required that I actually go beyond critical race theory because, as Leonardo points out, race is not adequately defined in critical race theory. So I've actually also defined race as well to make sure it's clear what I'm speaking of. Also, think about it in terms of literacies, and that is meaningfully situated social practices. For example, old literacies, new literacies, youth literacies, Facebook literacies, and we can go on and on. That also includes racial literacies. Also, this is a genre analysis, and what I mean by that is I spent time trying to identify the recognizable discourse conventions as they were occurring in these texts. And also, I actually identified genres of race, which I define as recognizable forms of racialization. These are typical forms of race production. And so how I went into this study, I prepared the data set, simply just moving it from an online platform to Microsoft Word, de-identified the data set. I generated a word list because I expected to go into this and do a word count and see how the word count, if there were any statistically significant or percentage differences, that kind of thing. Also looked at the themes of the text, that is the Facebook post and the article, did a data reduction after working through all that for a while, particularly around the Facebook comments. And then I attempted to trace the typifications or genres of race as I could find them in the Facebook post, the article, as well as the comments. And so as a result of this process, and it was far, far more messy than it looks in a conference presentation, believe me. So the first thing that I was able to find is that there were 7 genres of race, and you see them listed there. And so here's how I was able to define those as I was able to trace them in the text. So common racial classification terms or equivalent terms is labeling. Implicit or explicit racial hierarchy is ranking. Sciencing is a bid for credibility with research or study. Common sensing is a bid for credibility with common sense. Naturalizing, that is using racial markers, and we have a list of those that we can refer to index human characteristics or capacities. Placializing, that is creating an equivalence between place and racialized people. And finally, vindicating, that is questioning racial common sense, countering white racial superiority, and regarding human plenitude rather than moving in the direction of essentializing humans. And so here's evidence from the data set. For example, Black student, Asian student, minority students, and white percentage is a really interesting one for my statistics folks in the room, my quantitative folks. You know that there's no such thing in statistical analysis as a white percentage. That doesn't exist in statistical analysis, and yet when we juxtapose white and percentage, we know exactly what you mean. So this is clearly a racialized move that we see in the form of labeling. Also, Asian students have never been in the lower gap with other minority students as far as ranking is concerned. Then a new study showed, and again, this is not necessarily that it's true or false, that's not really the point I'm trying to make. The point is what kinds of discursive moves are being made, what kinds of bids are being made through this. So a new study showed that not a single Black student had passed the math and reading exams that are required by the state. And then common sensing. How much time and effort did these students and their parents put into their educational pursuits? After all, the child's first teacher is the parent. So just kind of going at these kind of common sense notions to be able to set up these perspectives of what's happening in the conversation. Also naturalizing. So out of the over 1,000 Black students, not a single one was able to pass. So there's something essential about their being Black and being able to do this. Also, over 600 Hispanic students in 28 schools, they were not able to pass either. Something essentially about who they are that makes it incapable. There's some equivalence going on here. And then the article specified that 31 inner city New York schools, right? So the idea there is inner city could include a number of things in terms of Catholic schools, private schools, homeschooling. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could be included in inner city. But of course, the connotation and what they're trying to do is point toward a racial kind of understanding of inner city. Another one that didn't show up in this data set, you've heard it 1,000 times, I'm sure, is urban. How urban is a racialized way of talking about it, all right? Also, vindicated. No, I'm not providing excuses, but rather valid reasons that are being ignored. They're pushing back against this argument. And the development of a blame the child and blame the race mentality. The worst part is that even some of us accept this blame. And this person is 3 exclamation points, like they're about to jump through Facebook to push back on what they're seeing in this conversation. And so that brings to the next finding. What kinds of students are written as social fact? And I defined that using Bazerman's work because this was a written text. Those things that people believe to be true and therefore bear on how they define the situation, and then of course they act as though these facts were the case. And I've also, in my own work, further reading since then, connected it to Holland's work on figured worlds. And so what I found is that really it came down to 2 types of students that were written as social fact: deficiency philosophy students and vindicationist philosophy students. And so, according to the article that I showed you, and by the way, that article was only like 372 words long, so it didn't take a lot of words to accomplish. It wasn't a dissertation. This was just a 300-word little paragraph that made these kinds of moves. So according to this article, Black students are totally failed learners, not even a single Black student, for example. Black students are not successful in school or even after school. Academically, Black students have nothing in common with Asian students and are incapable of passing standardized tests in math and reading. Black students are seldom enrolled in high-performing schools. Black students come from inferior families and enroll in inferior schools. And Black students don't work hard enough to succeed in school, and their parents shirk the basic responsibilities of parenting their own children. So this is the kind of world that they're setting up through this language. And so in contrast to that, we have vindication philosophy students that were written as social fact as well. That's according to the Facebook comments responding to the original article in the post. So Black students, according to this worldview, Black students are victims of institutional racism and systemic malpractice. Black students are resilient, intellectually admirable, and academically elite. Black students come from supportive families. And so my point is not to really try to come down one way or the other in terms of how these students have been written as social fact. My point is simply to raise a question, you decide, you act. Which social facts are more credible depictions of Black students as you see it? Okay? So how might problematic genres and the students written through them be rewritten? Well, it turns out as I looked closer and closer at the analysis, I found that really those six of the genres of race showed up in both situations. So whether they were writing as social fact, vindication of Black students, or deficiency philosophy Black students, 6 of the genres were already there. The difference was that there was only one situation in which the vindicationist philosophy, or genre, was also present. So for example, you had questioning the racial labeling, the sciencing, and the common sensing. You had countering white superordinate racial ranking. And you had regarding the human plenitude that would be simplified and obscured by racial naturalizing and by racial glacializing. So it's not necessarily that we should get rid of, as I see this in the data, get rid of labeling or get rid of all these other things. It's that they need to be coupled with the vindication genre, as I'm understanding it now. And I certainly would love to hear you think through this with me. And so here's one example. This is kind of a raw look at the kind of thing I was doing in terms of trying to make sense of this. And this is still a little neater than it really was at the time. We don't have time to read it all, but as you can see, I literally just kind of tried to grab, okay, right here, that's labeled. Okay, that's plagiarized, or so I think it is. And there was also some ambiguity and some confusion. I've gotten a slide of that too, where I wasn't sure what was going on. So, you know, vindicating and labeling is happening. Okay. And so you kind of begin to see the kind of moves they're making discursively as you walk through the text. And so I only have a few minutes left, but I want to just pause here, maybe 60 seconds, 30 seconds, and just give you a chance to tell me, if you were trying to bracket off what's happening in this example, which genres of race do you see? And I'll just pause and give you about 30 seconds to kind of make sense of it for yourself. Feel free to highlight something that I didn't underline. I was trying to be helpful since this is your first time doing such an analysis. But you can totally ignore my underlines if you don't find them helpful, or add underlines where I haven't. And so, again, this is just inviting you to help me think through how to make sense of what I'm seeing in the data, and certainly ask questions, and I'll be glad to post this slide. And so in conclusion, what a test that I've identified 7 genres of race. Well, first of all, sparse use of keywords. My keyword list was worthless, that I spent time generating. I didn't get anywhere with the word level approach. Nothing was important at all. So sparse use of keywords, there's variation at the word level, which suggests to me high typification. Also recognition by persons socialized in the wider social rhetorical context of common sense racialization, constant at the social action, speech act, genre level as well, which suggests to me high intersubjectivity. What I mean by that is, you're not using the same words over and over again. You're using different words, but at the speech act, at the genre level, at what you're trying to accomplish through the genre, people are still recognizing you as accomplishing race. You're doing race, and you're being understood as doing race, and you're not simply staying at the word level. So that suggests to me high intersubjectivity. So what are the implications? Racial labeling and the other genres of race offline, for example, fields like divinity, medicine, social services, law enforcement, and education, of course, especially in American classroom. I'm thinking about Pollock's work there, where she talks about race talk and color muteness. So how can we begin to think about these in an offline context now that we've been able to find what's happening in an online platform and post typographic text? Racial literacy is applied in instruction and in other research. Thinking about Stevenson's work, he has a book about promoting racial literacy in school. I'm synthesizing Stevenson and a few other people to move toward racial literacies instead of a singular racial literacy. Also, vindicating genre enacted, offline and online, to rewrite common sense black and white rather than consent to uncritical racialization or escapist post-racialism, which is tied to the vindicationist perspective and also post-white orientation within that vindicationist perspective. And so for future research, what other methods of analysis may refine our understanding of these 7 genres of race? Are there others? And I'm already beginning to see some signs that there may be. There's one I'm thinking about in my dissertation work that seems to be happening. We'll see. We'll find out. Stay tuned. Race production via genres of race in American classrooms and also school organizations. And then how might race production, where black students are concerned, impact classroom instruction and learning outcomes? And this is not just written, but also unwritten. So when we think about written and unwritten ways that race production occurs, how might that impact classroom instruction and learning? And that's actually where my dissertation is moving at this point. So thank you for your time. I look forward to you helping me think through this.